Welcome to the Toronto Global Forum's closing session, International Trade at the Time of Global Uncertainty, or as one of our panelists, Mairead Lavery, said, we've saved the best for last. My name is Lee Smout, and I'm president of the World Trade Center Toronto. I also have the pleasure of moderating this session, and I want to thank the International Economic Forum of the Americas for inviting me to participate, as well as for continuing to host this amazing event. The forum has really become an important annual opportunity for global business and civic leaders to come together and discuss our shared future. While the pandemic prevented us from doing so in person this year, I hope over these past 3 days, you all still were able to listen, learn, and connect with like-minded. Because if the COVID pandemic has illustrated anything, it's that our world is deeply connected and increasingly borderless. Whether it is recreational travel, education, and working abroad, or of course today's subject, trade. In fact, in the earliest days of the pandemic, global trade was expected to fall by as much as 1/3 this year, but more recent predictions estimate that may not be the case, with strong rebounds in nearly every sector. Still, most regions will experience double-digit declines in trade volume. So that's where we're going to end this year's forum, with a conversation about trade, its future, and its role in our global economic recovery. Because trade will have a role. Despite shaking the foundation, COVID hasn't altered the fundamental benefits of a global value chain. That's particularly the case for a region like Toronto, whose local markets are just too small and fragmented for businesses to scale up with a solely domestic growth plan. At the World Trade Center Toronto, we're working hard to clear the road for those, helping them become trade ready, build export plans, and break into new. A significant piece of that work is information sharing, connecting business owners with key insights and, of course, experts who can help them on it. This afternoon, the forum have done the same for you. It's now my pleasure to introduce those experts. First, please welcome Member of Parliament Rachel Bendayan, the Parliamentary Secretary to Canada's Minister of Small Business, Export Promotion and International Trade. Having previously served as Chief of Staff to the Minister of Small Business and Tourism, MP Bendayan entered politics and now works with Minister Mary Ng to promote Canada as a great place to invest. I know the businesses who've come through our World Trade Center have benefited tremendously from her ministry's efforts, and their support has helped us expand our Trade Accelerator program beyond the major city centers to smaller, though still important, Canadian municipalities. Welcome, Rachel. Next, please welcome Mairead Lavery. As the President and CEO of Export Development Canada, Mairead shares our World Trade Center goal of helping more companies grow and succeed internationally. Recognizing EDC's 75-year track record of success, and no doubt its excellent leadership, the government expanded their mandate this year to help support businesses struggling with a dramatic decrease in demand due to the pandemic. Since then, the organization has helped thousands of businesses endure this economic downturn. Prior to joining EDC, Mairead held numerous executive roles at Bombardier, and is a champion of aligning social and environmental responsibility with economic vision. Great to have you with us today, Mairead. The final member of our panel is Integra Capital's founder and president, Dr. Jose Luis Manzano. Dr. Manzano is an Argentine businessman with a deep understanding of Latin American public policy and global emerging markets. He founded the international private equity and merchant banking firm 25 years ago, and has remained a noted and respected voice in Argentina's corporate, political, and media circles. Welcome, Dr. Manzano.
Thanks very much.
All right, so we're all here. I think we'll move right into questions. Remember, you can ask your own through the Q&A function. That's to the audience, so please do that. And while you're getting warmed up and thinking of all the tough ones, I'll start with a few of my own. Hopefully make it easy on these folks for a start and warm them up a little bit for you. And I think the way to do that, the best way to do that might be to start with a really, really broad one, which is, what role do you see international trade playing in our economic recovery? And maybe, Rachel, if we could start with you.
Surely, thanks. Happy to start this panel off. What an honor and real pleasure it is to be with you all, and I'd like to thank the forum as well for organizing this. It seems to have been an incredible lineup, and I guess I'll dig right into it to say that, you know, it would come as no surprise to anybody listening, I believe, that trade is really key to Canada's economic recovery. And I think that you can see the evidence of that in the last 5 years. Our government has been consistently negotiating and concluding trade agreements, diversifying our trading partners. Canada now has access to 49 different countries through our 14 trade agreements. Some of the obvious and very large ones are CETA, CPTPP, and of course the new NAFTA, which I was very involved in, and which we were able to get ratified in the House on the very last day of our sitting before we rose for the pandemic. And so let me also perhaps mention that we are very aware that global supply chains are under significant pressure right now, and that it hasn't been easy. We have seen that over-reliance on a single supplier or customer is a huge risk for our businesses, and I know that that's something that you are also following very closely. And I guess we can certainly talk more about this over the course of the panel, but COVID-19 cannot and should not be used as an excuse to turn inwards, to stop or put up roadblocks to free trade, or to encourage governments around the world to move in a more protectionist direction. We need to keep trade flowing. We need to continue the leadership that Canada has so far been displaying on the international stage, whether it's at the WTO through the Ottawa Group that Minister Ning is really leading on, or through any of the other multilateral institutions. We know how important they are to keeping a rules-based international trading order working and working properly. And so we've really taken that leadership role to heart, and I'll be happy to get into that perhaps a little bit later in the discussion. Some interesting things happening with the Ottawa Group, and certainly a lot of interesting discussions in government, whether it's around cabinet or caucus, regarding how we can continue to diversify our trading relationships to ensure that absolutely everybody in Canada has access to all of the benefits that come from trade. I might just end with a statistic to say that our efforts in this regard are paying off. As our trade has started to recover, exports grew 17% in June, 11% in July, and we're seeing those numbers go up, and I'm sure Marie at EDC will have some more numbers for you, but I think it's important that those numbers continue to increase, and that our recovery continues to be based on things like our trading relationship.
Well, that's amazing, Rachel. A lot of that is music to my ears, and you've touched on about 20 things we need to talk about, so we'll try to make sure that happens. Mairead, I'll pass over to you for main comments.
Yeah, thanks, Lee, and Rachel absolutely did a great job at leading us into this. I'll perhaps add two things. At the macro level, Canada is a trading nation. We have a very small local domestic economy. And when Rachel speaks about the free trade agreements and the expansion of trade, that opens us up to a customer base of 1.5 billion customers around the world. So trade has to be part of the recovery. It's an imperative. It's not a nice to have. It's something that we absolutely need to consider as we think about building back better. So I certainly see the role that trade can play, the role that trade has played in terms of innovation, investment, jobs, prosperity, and that will continue. It doesn't mean it's without its challenges during COVID, but we really must continue the diversification journey, and we must continue the inclusive trade journey to ensure that all Canadians have access to the benefits of trade. So I'm excited about the role that international trade can play. We are seeing from our customers, our large customers, of course, continuing their operations around the world. We're seeing, interestingly, the same level of interest from what I would say maybe more medium-sized companies to continue to invest abroad, to expand their market presence, to get closer to their customers. And the really good news yesterday out of Government of Canada was, in fact, that we're starting to see an increase again in the number of small companies that are exporting. They had really suffered quite a significant drop at the start of the COVID crisis. 3,000 small companies less exporters, which is quite significant because we'd like to see more small companies engage in exporting. And I think one of the real trends and real benefits that we've seen is for companies that were engaged in e-commerce and digital activities that actually were able to get through some of the COVID crisis given their reliance on technology. And that's probably creating some of the upswing when we see other companies, other small companies engaging in a technological agenda and therefore actually being able to embrace international trade more. And I'm surely you, I know at the Toronto Board of Trade have been spearheading some campaigns for small companies to actually enhance their digital presence. And I think that will be a way in which Canada can actually engage in international trade at a level for all firms, and that's particularly exciting.
Yes, thank you, Mairead. We've come to realize, along with everybody, that these companies they're having to manage all of their business digitally, not just selling on e-commerce, but managing their workforce, managing every aspect of their business, is supply chains. I wonder how much of loss of trade from some of those small companies might be related to disrupted supply chain. They just didn't have what they could have sold otherwise, and that kind of thing. So anyway, that certainly digital is an important piece of this. And I wonder if, Jose, if I can just turn to you on this high level.
I have a comment on the context. I believe the context is still more negative of what we all could wish. I believe the context is highly negative. At the moment of the pandemic in which we are is around the middle of it. So we're not at the tail of the pandemic. We are at the middle of the pandemic. The middle of the pandemic means that we still have, for developed countries, at least one more year of disruption, and for developing countries, maybe 2 years of disruption. And this will impact in trade, and this will impact in economic growth. I believe this early recovery may relate to the level of activity that was based on the European North American summer, but this level of recovery will be threatened by the figures of infection that we are seeing today in the US and in Europe. And the summer moving to Africa and South America will bring less to the economic activity of the world because those regions have less weight in the global GDP. Having said that, I can only emphasize what the two ladies that preceded me have said. There is only one tool to deal with this, which is more international engagement, more international cooperation, more trade cooperation, more rule-based economic in the world. And this is threatened by tendencies of nationalism, import substitution, protectionism. Those threats, together with populist policies in several countries, put at risk something that has caused centuries to humankind to develop, which is a rules-based system for everything, for electing governments, for selling and buying goods, for trading currencies, for whatever. So those of us that believe in free trade, that believe in global institutions, that believe in rules, have to stick to it for different reasons. Canada, because, been said twice, is a small domestic market, and it's a highly educated population that produce goods with very high added value. So you need a world that works, that can trade, and where there's no paranoia about having close supply. The idea of import substitutions and having everything in every country brought countries to crazy things, like small countries like Uruguay trying to have automobile factories for everything. being absolutely autonomous and independent. Same thing in energy for a small country. And then the concept evolved rather than to energy sovereignty, evolved to energy security. And energy security could rely on global supply chains. So I think we have worked a lot. Humankind has suffered wars to create a global system. We cannot give up now. And Canada has a role there because of the values. It's a democracy, it's a competitive market based on education and merit. So I think we have to stick to the values that created the system that work better and has increased life expectancy. If we give up on that, the dark winter that is coming will be worse for everybody, much worse. Maybe there are short-term gains in shorting corners, protection, artificial barriers, but the only real way is real global exchange, engagement, cooperation, and trade.
Yeah, can I
Thank you,
jump in,
Jose.
Lee?
Yeah, please jump.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that Jose makes. I mean, I'll sort of reflect just as the head of Export Development Canada. Last year we were celebrating our 75th anniversary, and Export Development Canada is a Bretton Woods institution, you know, post the Second World War, to deal with reconstruction, to deal with the effects of war, and actually trade as a way to bring that international cooperation to the table. So I think there absolutely is a role for international rules-based trading and the role that Canada can play in that system, having been a huge anchor to the system post the Second World War. So we have a lot of experience in doing that. And then I just bring it right down to the company level. And when you're a company trading, the one thing that you want is to try and get as many certainties on your list as you can. And rules-based trading does that. What are the rules of trading? What are the import rules? What are the export rules? What are the rules of entry into a country? What are visa? Anytime you can secure certainty around how you're actually going to engage in a country is extremely important. It builds confidence. It builds confidence in the exporter themselves. And I mean, the statistics will say they will choose markets that have free trade agreements because they have a better understanding of what rules-based trading looks like. And that's how we need to re-establish confidence. I absolutely agree. The single biggest metric that exporters should be watching today is pandemic statistics and how the pandemic is progressing in individual countries, because the response is different in all those countries, and they have to consider how that affects their business in a specific location. How does it affect their consumers? How does it affect their supply chain? And how does it affect their customers? So extremely important that they can rely on the rules and that they have visibility then into how the pandemic is progressing in individual countries. And I think as much as we're looking at a health crisis, that could continue to devolve into what Jose was talking about, which is, populist approaches to trade, to government, what is the national sentiment in particular countries. And really we have to watch how what is a health crisis will start to evolve into potentially government crisis, into crisis in other institutions, not just with respect to the health system.
Maybe, Leah, I could just jump in there to say, this is such an important conversation, and I'm thinking not only of my role as parliamentary secretary, but before I entered politics, I was an international trade lawyer, really focusing on international arbitrations and investor-state disputes. And it is absolutely critical for businesses to know that there is a stable and predictable rules-based system when they're doing business. Our position as a government, in order to encourage our trading partners and in order to bring the international community together to ensure an international rules-based system is there, is because we want to help our Canadian companies, is because we know that in order for companies to succeed, there needs to be a strong framework behind our trading system. So I just wanted to add that, and I couldn't agree more with my two co-panelists.
Well, that's great. Thank you guys for jumping in, because what you've done is followed up very nicely on a theme that Jose was bringing up around rules-based trade and had been mentioned a couple of times. And I think the critical nature of it related to supply chains. So basically, you've got us through what I was going to bring up as a second question, which is perfect. And so I think maybe, in some ways it sounded a little bleak, what Jose was saying. And I think he was saying Canada has a role to play to make it, to keep it good and make it better. But I actually chose to find some positive in there, which was, he said we're in the middle of the process here. So at least we're not at the beginning. I recognize we're not at the end, but I wonder if we could talk a little bit about recovery. And, there's this term K-shaped recovery. It's been used quite a bit, talking about some areas of the economy, some responding differently than others. And I guess I wonder if we maybe start with you, Mairead, and just talk about, maybe explain a bit what it is, but also talk about what companies are at kind of either end of that path, and how we're going to help the ones that are maybe in more trouble than others.
Yeah, Lee, I mean, there's so many letters being applied to what this recovery looks like. Is it V-shaped, W-shaped, U-shaped? We heard Jose talk about L-shaped, and certainly K-shape is out there as a particular letter to describe the recovery. You know, at EDC, we're obviously always looking at global export forecasts and looking at trade internationally and how it's going. Like, if we want to stay on your positive theme, we're forecasting a 16% drop in exports this year from Canada, and you're saying to yourself, why is Mairead saying that's positive? Well, that is actually a lower amount than we had in the 2008-2009 financial crisis. It's a lower drop. That being said, it's a 16% drop. And when we look forward to 2021, we see that coming back to the tune of 9%. So coming back, again, positive, but still not to the level, pre-pandemic levels. So without a doubt, we are, very challenged. We would suggest that it looks more like a tick mark shaped, where we really are going into a V at the bottom, and then we'll come out of it, and probably will come out of it more slowly. The slope of entry out of the crisis will depend on the health situation and the pandemic numbers around the world. That is without doubt the single biggest driver that we're seeing at the moment. So if you imagine now we're dealing with this checkmark type recovery, how does K-shape fit into it? Well, the story underneath that recovery is extremely different depending on which sector you're in. So we really have a divergent view, which is most unusual. So you see at the very positive end of this, actually sectors that are doing quite well and really coming out of the crisis. Agri-food is one of them. So food doing very well, mining's doing well. In Canada, lumber, building supplies, and for anyone who lives local and has tried to find construction help this summer or has tried to do any renovations at their home, they will certainly understand the pricing of construction and the pricing of lumber. So in Canada, we're seeing that as a very positive trend. We're also seeing anything related to online retail and logistics as extremely positive, and telecom, and no surprise, here we are, virtual teleconference. So all of those sectors are doing very well. And in fact, there is, demand is outstripping supply, and that is great news, and lots of interest in Canadian products around the world. But it's a very different story if you are in tourism, arts and entertainment, aerospace, transportation, and anything associated, even with services in general, because services has often been associated with the movement of people across our borders, and that hasn't really been possible during the crisis. So you end up with this very divergent view of our economy, whereby some sectors are doing very well, some sectors are really, really struggling, and overall you get this slower pace of growth exiting from the recovery. And that's really the K-shape, some that are going this way, some that are going that way. And that is honestly what we are seeing. And we're seeing that, I guess it depends on which country you're in. That's the Canadian experience. And it really depends on the country and their own strengths and what industries they have going as well. But again, the number one indicator that will change this, that will change consumer behavior, and even consumers, sorry, Lee, I just had a thought about consumers. There's also differences in our consumers today. We have consumers who have retained their jobs, who have not been able to go and take their vacations, to spend on restaurants. Their disposable income is going into savings accounts, and they have more disposable income. That's pent-up demand, and that speaks to an ability to come through this with demand there from the consumer. But equally, there's a significant number of people who have lost their job, and that spending power has gone out of the economy. So really, we're just seeing very divergent views, both in the demand and the supply side. And really, the one trigger then is the pandemic, the health crisis, and how that's progressing in different locations. And we all just have to look to our local economies to say how are small businesses doing in those economies. Small businesses are the bellwether of the Canadian economy because it's mostly made up of small businesses. And if they're closed in your area, well, that speaks then to the actual economic generation in your area. It is under pressure because those small businesses are not there. The consumers are not going out. They're not spending. And the jobs aren't there in the background. So very different depending on the sector you're in, Lee, for a K-shaped recovery.
Well, and going into a Toronto winter, I think a lot of those businesses we really have to feel are at risk. I wonder if, Rachel, if there's a difference between how we can support or leverage large versus small and medium-sized businesses as we try to recover through trade.
I think what you've seen over the course of the last few months is that the government has developed programs specific to small and medium-sized businesses, and then a separate set of supports for larger businesses. And there are, of course, some supports like the emergency wage subsidy, which are available across the board and which have been absolutely critical to the survival of both large and small businesses. I believe we're at about 3.8 million Canadians being supported by the government's wage subsidy. And so many of the entrepreneurs that I've spoken to over the course of the last few months have told me that were it not for that critical program, they would have probably either closed their business or certainly let all of their employees go. So I think that the CEBA loan program, which was a $40,000 loan for small and medium-sized businesses, just now increased by another $20,000. Is something that's obviously geared to our smaller and perhaps smaller medium-sized businesses, and then we have much larger loans available through EDC and BDC for larger companies. And I would say, though, on the whole, that when we're looking at it from the trade lens, that both small, medium, and larger size companies should be very much thinking of international markets at this time. We see that the growth of Canadian businesses is coming from digitization and selling online, and that trend needs to continue. I know that there was recently some additional funding announced through a new program in order to help businesses in Canada go digital. EDC has some fantastic programs, including Can Export, which is helping Canadian companies who are looking to export for the first time get set up and successful. So I think that all of these programs are there in order to encourage businesses of all sizes to trade, and and that's really where we're going to see the growth in the future. I know that we were just talking about how mining and construction sectors are doing very well. Ag tech is booming right now in Canada, and we have such strong agricultural roots as a country that it's nice to see that sector doing so well. Certainly there are sectors that are suffering more than others, given the measures in place as a result of the pandemic. But we are continuing to apply sector specific lenses on everything that we're doing, and I think what you will see over the course of the next few weeks and months is some more sector specific supports coming out.
Yeah, just on the size of companies, and you sort of referenced it, and we started with small companies. I think the size of company is actually a really important distinction here. And, Rachel was describing some of the programs that are available to the companies. And of course, we've seen such great take up on CEBA, which is more oriented towards small companies. But going into in the crisis, there's been different things at play depending on the size of the company. So if you're a small company, these access to government programs was extremely important. And I would have to say our Canadian banks have done a great job in supporting our small companies through the crisis. So when you talk to the Canadian banks, notwithstanding the provisioning they've had to take for the business they're doing, they've really been working very hard on deferral programs to ensure that their companies, for the last 6 months in particular, have really had some runway to get through the crisis. And that absolutely is true for the medium-sized companies as well. But unlike the 2008-2009 crisis, our large companies actually were still able to access capital markets. They were able to source other sources of funding. We're seeing quite an active acquisition market. We're seeing an active venture market. We're seeing lots of interest in investors in investing in companies during this period of time. And any company that went into the crisis with a strong balance sheet is also looking for opportunities. So I would say our large companies have still been able to access financing. And I'd love to hear Jose's comments on this, if it's the true in the markets that he's really working in. Large companies have still been able to access it. I'd say pricing is getting tighter now than it was during the first 6 months of the crisis. Medium-sized companies, the same thing, more likely to be working with their bank, accessing government programs, as well then as, perhaps finding new investors and different sources of capital, and small companies really working with their bank and with these government programs. So the size of the company has really mattered, and that equally is something that we need to consider as we consider recovery. Like, how do we help these different companies through with what they can do? And I certainly think of the large companies. Supply chain disruption is not just challenging, but also an opportunity whereby larger companies may want to bring more local small companies into their supply chain as a risk diversification measure. And that in itself is an indirect step to get small companies exporting. So that's something that I would like to see us being able, and certainly at EDC, we're talking about how we support. We've had many large companies approach us and say, can you help us with our supply chain? They need support during this period of time. So our large companies are really stepping up. They recognize the role they play in actually securing like a Canadian supply chain that has a large footprint of Canadian companies within it. I'd say our medium-sized companies have some very exciting opportunities, and we have to be able to help them with those opportunities, whether it's investing abroad to get closer to their customer, even just the logistics of being able to sell in certain countries today, or whether it's actually acquisition opportunities that they now see given the turmoil that is in the market. And then for our small companies, actually getting them into supply chains and getting them to be able to deliver their products and through e-commerce, through digital, getting them to benefit from exporting. So we should think about the recovery as well, linked to, what can different companies do in the recovery, because it won't be the same for all.
Very, very interesting points, Mairead, and a lot of really good ones. I wonder, one of the interesting pieces there, you were following a little bit on Rachel's talking about some of the supports that were mostly on the kind of debt side, and I think who better than Dr. Manzano? Jose, I'm wondering whether you can talk a little bit about the capital side, and Mairead addressed it a little bit, but is the capital out there? I understand there's investment opportunity, but what is capital doing right now?
I was thinking exactly on how that overlap with the role of Canada. The pandemic found the regions at very different situations. Some regions with good growth, some regions already very slow growth, some regions with excess of debt, and it was the same thing for companies. So when you go, for example, in Latin America, and there are big opportunity acquisitions, because the traditional holders of investment in Latin America, mostly from Spain or France, have high levels of leverage and are very attracted to focus in Europe because of the recovery package in Europe. So maybe there is a room there, or there is a room there for Canadian companies, especially when there are two things crossing international trade and international investment. One is the pandemic, and the other one is the friction between the United States and China. When you put the two factors together in big markets like Canada or Colombia, or mid-sized markets like Argentina or Portugal, Spain, there is room for Canadian expertise, Canadian management, a Canadian set of rules, and for acquisitions and for trade. Then the other thing is size. On size, the very small companies, mid-sized companies, the first assistance they need is how to move in a digital world. Those that were already prepared to work in a digital world, they did better. The other one fell the digital divide. The one that were not prepared, if they wouldn't have access to government support and programs and training, they will not survive, because we still have several months ahead. So if we talk on the K-shaped recovery, we have to deal with the downside of the K. And those are the ones that still need government intervention in several forms. It's money for salaries, digital access, digital training, contacts for export, and this, when Marie said, creating the bridge between big companies and small and medium-sized companies to recreate their supply chain closer to home. Without forgetting that if there is no global system, not everybody can be an exporter. The world already went through this in 1910, 1915. Not everybody can be an exporter. You have to sell and buy. You have to sell and buy. You have to have rules. Rachel mentioned arbitration. Arbitration, WTO panels play an important, unique role in leveling a field among asymmetric players. The only way to level the field between a small company in Canada with a huge US multinational or a state-owned enterprise in China is through rules. It's the only thing that humankind has invented to deal with this size of asymmetries. Rules, the rule of international law. So how is going to be the recovery? Well, we need to be prepared to keep injecting money through fiscal and monetary policy. We have to be prepared to have government assisting in educating and making sure small and medium-sized enterprise can live in a digital world. Government to stay present for longer of what is thought as the beginning and stick to the set of rules that put together the modern economy. The modern economy has been the best economic creation in human life. We have increased life expectancy. We have increased life expectancy, and we are a lot more of what we were 200 years before. So we've done well. We have done well. We have to protect what we have done and not forget the impact on the environment. So trade, recovery, government intervention with an eye on the environmental impact. So the recovery packages will also create opportunities in sustainability, but that also call for technology and that also call for knowledge, and Canada is well prepared for that. So I think we will get out of this. We will get out of this, and we have to get out with the rules. We have to protect the rules. We have to protect the small and medium-sized enterprises. We have to protect the big enterprises because they are the locomotive of the economy, but we also have to protect the rules because the world is very asymmetric. And in an asymmetric world, the only protections are rules.
Fascinating. A much more positive note than the last one. Sounded like some really good stuff. We're moving onward and upward. I think one of the interesting things that I'm hearing, and I'm wondering if you could each touch on, because we're really down to our last few minutes, and this is a bit off topic, or it's on a bit of a different tangent, but it was mentioned, and I'm going to go, I think it was Mairead said something about Build It Back Better, and we've heard a lot about that, and I can tell you the Board of Trade, when the pandemic hit, we did something pretty quickly. We moved into something called the Reimagining Recovery Framework. It had 6 work tables. It was a real work tracks. It was a big thing. I chaired one that was about sector recovery, and it had 11 different work tables, at least 25 people on each. There are about 300 people involved in this effort of really taking a look from all their different types of experience. I mean, it included labor and business and social interest groups and so on. Really fascinating. And one of the themes, there were many themes that were different among the sectors, of course, entertainment, versus some of the strong export type sectors like food and beverage that we've talked about. There were very great differences. But one thing that came up constantly was people really felt they want to come out of this recovery with something that's better than what we had, a better world. And I think some other things that have happened at the same time with George Floyd and so on have even accentuated that. So I wonder if we could just quickly talk about what that means, because I just wanted to say one more thing. I apologize. I want you guys to do the talking, but Mark Carney came and spoke at our podium one time, and he talked about green and clean as an enormous opportunity, like could really become the next economy, not something that, oh no, not a carbon tax or that kind of thing. Don't think of it like that. Think of it that any money that's put into it creates opportunity for smart businesses like smart Canadian tech businesses and so on. And we are strong in clean tech, of course. And again, also somewhat to Jose's points here. But I wonder if we could just quickly talk about it, and I'll just let you jump in, whoever wants to, that Build It Back Better thing and how it is an opportunity, and especially when it comes to international trade.
Look, I just see it as a great opportunity. I had the opportunity last year to speak in Europe about human rights and also about climate change. And I think what was really interesting, or I had this aha moment, which is that you can no longer think of things in the silos of this is a human rights issue or this is a global health issue or we need to address climate. These are all interlinked issues. So it's trade, it's climate, it's human rights, it's all of these things. So when we think about responsible business, building back better, building clean, building green, some of the words that we've heard linked to recovery, we actually have to do all of these things. So we need to bring everyone along with us. So that's like a human element to this. We have to have inclusive trade. We have to find opportunities for our Indigenous exporters, and of course I always talk about exporting, but our Indigenous exporters, our women entrepreneurs, our Black entrepreneurs, because we have to bring everyone to the table. If we don't, we're leaving some behind, and that is a lost opportunity to bring all of that strength to the table. And that human aspect will bring solutions to solve the problems of our day, like climate. How do we address carbon? How do we get towards some low carbon goals? Because if we don't, we then trigger some other human issues. So it's a really interesting thing, Lee. And I think the more that we can factor this in to what we're doing and the initiatives that we have and how we actually refresh rules going forward, I think this will all be super helpful. I think Canada has a great opportunity. We have a great opportunity to demonstrate how our regulations, how our rules, how our trading system can actually help in energy at large and the energy transition. So whether that is what is seen as a very negative view of Canada today vis-a-vis fossil fuels to something that Canada is also very strong at, clean technology. How can Canada lead and demonstrate to the world that the investment and the earnings of our fossil fuel companies can be invested in clean technology and demonstrate the use of technology to actually build a lower carbon future? To me, that's an incredible opportunity that Canada has, because we have that absolute range that we're all going to need to bring us to a different lower carbon future. So I just see lots of opportunities. Canada also has some great immigration policies that builds a stronger Canadian base that is more diverse, that equally can demonstrate to the world what Canada can do by being more inclusive in trade. So I just think we have all the ingredients to actually showcase what a future could like, a better future that does address climate, that does bring other underrepresented groups into trade, and that is based on a rules-based trading system. That puts Canada as a great partner for trade in the future, and I just think we have so much opportunity.
That's great. Thanks so much, Marita. And just we're being given the hook because it is that time, but I wonder if Rachel and Jose might have just a quick thought on that.
I have 30 seconds. I can only
perfect.
adhere to what Mary said. There is a role and there is a need, a role for Canada and a need of Canada. You need to recover the Paris Agreement. You need to recover a global vision on the problem and a global approach to the problem. And Canada has values and success to share with the world. Values of democracy, economic freedom, with an active government that is there to support their citizens and companies. So we need more Canada involved in the international sphere if we want to recover faster and better.
I think what
you just made a lot of friends here in Canada.
Yes,
Go ahead,
the world
Rachel,
needs more Canada. I think that's what you were saying. I guess I would just end this great panel by saying that we are very much, at the federal government looking back better. I think you heard some of that in the speech from the throne. It's certainly our transition to low carbon economy, the energy transition that is already taking place in this country and how the government can continue to support that, whether it's through EDC and investments through the Canada account for clean tech or, really providing tax incentives for companies that are moving to net zero productions. I think that we have all of the ingredients in Canada, as other panelists said, to be a leader on the world stage, not only with respect to the environment and our economy, but as we've been saying from the very beginning, our moral standing with like-minded countries around the world is allowing us to take a leadership role when it comes to ensuring that the rules-based international trading system can continue. And that is imperative not only for our Canadian businesses, but really for the health of our economy as a whole. And so I know that you want to wrap up, but I look forward to building back better with the help of this forum and all of the people listening. I have launched a consultation already on how we can do that, and I hope to get your views as well.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I am obviously an enormous fan of anything about trade, so this has been a real pleasure for me to hear all of your insights, and I hope it's been useful to our audience. I won't reiterate anything. I think you guys said it all so well, and I can't thank you enough, honestly. Thank you also to the International Economic Forum of the Americas for welcoming Toronto Region Board of Trade and the World Trade Center as continued partners. We really value your partnership. Those interested in some of the activities that we are doing, I mean, the EDCs and BDC are amazing partners in our recovery activation, our trade accelerator program, TAP, which is all across Canada. And the federal government and the Ontario government are really big supporters financially of our recovery activation program, which is about helping SMEs go digital. And this is the thing that's going to get you through this. But as we say, learn, adapt, thrive. This is not just about getting through it. This is about thriving at the other end. And I think you've heard a lot of great messages about why Canadian SMEs have a great opportunity to do just that. So I just want to ask everybody to please stay online for some final remarks from Toronto Global Forum's President Joseph Clark. And panel, again, Mairead, Rachel, Jose, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you all for joining us, and enjoy this lovely evening.